So I have AJ back today. We had talked for on Thursday night. There's a video. If you haven't already seen it, I'll put that card up later, which was the first half of our discussion of the 2025, 2026 kind of projections. And we had concluded with Cybertruck. AJ, thank you for coming back and finishing up with part two. Where do we go from here?
First of all, hi Randy. Hi everyone. Yeah, so from here, we already discussed in part one some of the main automotive products. Now we are almost finishing up automotive, and we are about to talk about the upcoming, or as I call it, next generation models. The slide that you're looking at the moment is basically my projection, and this is based on management guidance. Tesla told us they expect production to start in H1 of next year. So when you look at my forecast, and here you see the blue bars, they show you deliveries in thousands. So I expect, conservatively, I should add a 5,000 unit production in 3Q, which then quickly ramps to 19,000, 30,000, and so on. And here the unit is in millions. So this adds up to, let's say, 24,000 units in next year, so a rather low number, but then quickly scales. I would like to point out that this is probably quite conservative because one, it's a more affordable vehicle, and hence it's a less complex vehicle, likely much lower part count, etc. Tesla told us, there was a big part of their announcement, that they expect to produce this vehicle on existing production lines, which also in theory should speed up ramp. So this is probably a weakness of my forecast, or perhaps one of the areas with greatest conservatism built in. This is just something to flag. Then in terms of pricing assumption, based on comments Elon made before, I do not expect this vehicle to be a $25,000 vehicle.
Right.
He was kind of dismissive of this idea by referring to the emergence of autonomy. So I think this will be segmented slightly below the Model Y, and for that reason, the pricing assumption you see here in this light green color is what I expect. You can see I expect a gradual decline, and as usual, I think initially, there will be different trims, probably two different trims, slightly higher end version, a slightly lower end, and this then creates over time, as you get a lower trim version, a slight kind of dilution of the price point. However, if I was to forecast this further out, over time this would increase for two reasons. Number one, the way I model everything is that when people buy FSD and not subscribe to buy it, it should factor into the revenue line, while the subscription is modeled separately. Because this is most likely how Tesla would account for it in just a corporate accounting. And when you do modeling, you want to model your segments in line with the disclosure of the company, which for a ton of reasons. But anyway, so this is sort of the concept behind. On top of that, when you do financial modeling in general, you have to keep in mind that the fundamental economic assumption is always an inflationary environment. Long-term prices go up. That's just the way it has always been. And therefore, even if you assume in any product line 0% growth, it is actually not a zero in the financial model. It should be the inflation rate.
Sure.
Because if you plug into any into a long-term model a zero, what you're effectively forecasting is a shrinking of the product line.
Yeah,
I have seen this error many, many times, even amongst seasoned investment bankers have made this error. I just want to point this out because it's unbelievably common. Anyways, so with that out of the way, you see that I expect relatively little impact of that model, simply because the ramping, etc. But again, there's a lot of conservatism built into this, and basically for if I go one slide back, you see the more clearly the financial impact. This is also about the upcoming model, and you see the revenue ramp. So very modest revenue in 3Q. I don't expect any material revenue in 2Q. So again, if Tesla would slip like, you know, a few months, this forecast would account for it. And still in 2026, I'm still accounting only for 8 billion. Just to give you an idea, 2024 revenue, total revenue will be 100 billion. So 8 billion, not massive needle move. And on top of that, again, this is an automotive product, so you should not expect huge margins, excluding software. The software piece is a different story. But as I said, the subscriptions I account for separately, and if people choose to buy these vehicles and buy the FSD, it's a different story. But because this is a lower price point vehicle, I would assume that not a significant number of customers will buy the FSD package for this product, because if you go for a cheaper vehicle, how can you afford like an $8,000 possibly software package? If you can afford $8,000 for software, you probably go for a Model Y or even S or X. So this is sort of the thought process behind that. So with that, we can move on to the next and basically final automotive product. So, and by the way, here on the right hand side, I always try to help people navigate sort of the financials by where basically what you see on the slide, where does this hit Tesla's financials, and the Semi, I still would categorize under an automotive product, because essentially it's just a B2B product, very much as a B2B auto sale. So when we look at the Semi, I mean, you see here zeros. There is a tiny bit of revenue, which is just the early dozens of deliveries to some trial customers, so that they make no material impact at all. And we do know that Tesla's factory for the Semi, it will be ready only from 2026. So therefore, I do expect a few more, a little bit of a ramp up in sort of the trial production right now. But still revenue is very, very low. And up here you see my pricing assumption. You can see also that this one is going down, but this one is going down for a different reason than the one I explained before. This one is going down because there are two versions of the Semi. There's one the long range version, which of course, because of much bigger battery, will cost a lot more. Plus there's a shorter range version, and I would expect Tesla to launch with the longer range version, but then slowly also phase in deliveries of the shorter range version. So that's something to keep in mind. Hence, there's a slight change in the ASP. But here again, here in this light purple color, you see the implied revenue, and you can also see that the revenue in 2025 here this year will be very marginal. And if I jump to this slide real quick, you see actually the revenue, and you see the revenue I estimate in 2025 just 100 million, so it's completely not a needle mover. And even in 2026, it still likely won't be a needle mover, because the volumes, if I jump here, you see the volumes again will still be relatively low. I expect about 600 units as they finalize the factory. They quickly ramp to 1.7K, 4.2K, 9.1K. Again, this is not a car. It's a much larger product, a lot more ports, etc. So, and it's the first time Tesla ever builds a Semi. In theory, it's very similar to building a car, but there are some differences, and therefore I wanted to be a little bit prudent on that side, and that's why I thought this makes sense. All in all, in the first year, I would expect like 16K or 15.6K units, but Tesla guided, I think long term what they're targeting is like 50K.
Right.
So there is potential, but overall, if for example 50K is like a little over 3 times what I'm showing here, it will never be like a massive product line, because and we discussed this in part 1 on a different product. Tesla has become so large that you have to have like a incredible product to make a big dent, because the total revenue line has gotten so big, and this is not going to change. Because
so for my thinking, just to let people, I think most people know, Brian Wong, others, myself, believe that this might eventually, that, Tesla hasn't made any statement like this, and I know you're going off of Tesla's statements. We think that this will eventually be a 1 million unit per year, and at 175,000 each, that would be, $175 billion a year. So we do think this is eventually, but fortunately or unfortunately, by that time, Optimus and Robotaxi revenues will be so large, it still won't be a needle mover, even at 175 billion.
Yeah. And there are some interesting things here, because, for example, in many developed countries, there is a shortage of truck drivers.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's just not a very popular job. It's long hours away from family, blah, blah. And once FSD works reliably, highly reliably,
yes.
so you can conceivably, of course, put it into a semi, and that would be a complete game changer.
Yeah.
Because attracting and retaining acceptable driver talent is a huge problem for these companies. I know people actually in that business, and that's always an issue for them. Right. And that's a true game changer. And this would be something probably, I don't know, into 27 time scale. So again, this is just ramping up, something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Potential, but just not in the next 2 years.
Right.
So then if we move on, we're almost leaving the auto part. This is now credit sales. So yesterday was the announcement that Trump might cut the tax credit in US, but this might also have different ramifications for this item. So first of all, what is credit sales? It's basically emissions certificates. A vehicle manufacturer like Tesla, who makes vehicles that don't emit emissions, Tesla earns these certificates, which they can sell. And they can sell it to companies who do not meet emission standards. And because in the US, very large vehicles with relatively low fuel efficiency are highly popular, and automakers love to sell them because they're very high margins. They accept not meeting average fleet vehicle consumption requirements and are happy to pay for these certificates. And that's why there's a significant market of these credits in the US. The vast majority of these credits come from California, because California by itself, if it was a country, it would be one of the largest countries on the planet.
I think about the fifth largest, I think. Yeah.
I don't have the exact ranking in mind, but it sounds about right. And this is something to keep in mind. So most of the credits come from California, because in the US, I think not even all states are captured by the credit system. So I think I might be wrong here, but it's around 14 or 16 states, something like that. But the bulk of the credits comes from California. This is also important to keep in mind, that California is Democrats controlled. Right. And California has had for several decades like special provisions where they were allowed to set their own emission standards. And typically what happened over the last decades, later the country took over the California standards in some form. But this is like a quite complex topic by itself. Long story short, what I want to say is this makes it, I think, less likely that it's kind of on a cutting board when Trump starts cutting the waste, because this is actually not an item that affects the government's budget, because this is borne by the automakers.
Right.
So there's no taxpayer money, and this makes it by definition a much lower target, because there's simply no taxpayer money to be gained from this. And so this is something to keep in mind. That's why in my forecast, I don't consider any tax cut to it. There could be even upside potential from Trump cutting the tax credit, because this likely causes people like General Motors, Ford, Stellantis, and also some other large ICE seller in North America, especially US, of course, to maybe pull out, not completely pull out, but basically dial back a little bit their electric vehicle ambitions, which would make their achieving of the emission standards even harder, which would then trigger even greater demand for these emissions certificates from people like Tesla.
Right.
So this could actually strengthen the demand for these credits. And the reason why, and when you look at this chart, you see the revenue of these credit sales. It looks rather small, in 2024, 3 billion, then 4, and then 5 billion. Not that exciting, you might think at first. But keep in mind, this is basically pure profit. This falls to the bottom line. And hence, what you see here, high level, apply a factor of 5 to kind of equalize it roughly with other types of Tesla's revenue, and this gives you a much better idea. So if we did this real quick, it's like 15 billion, 20 billion, 25 billion. So this gives you an idea. This is an important item. Yeah, at the moment, I don't see this at risk. Near term and longer term, this won't matter that much anyway, because then other earnings generators start to kick in a big time. And so maybe shall I stop for a moment, Randy?
No, that's good. I have absolutely nothing to add. It's so complete, and you're doing great. Yep.
Okay, then I just move on. So then the next revenue item is a rather uninteresting one, but one we should still cover, which is the auto leasing. So auto leasing is just basically when customer buy via leasing a vehicle from Tesla. This is a rather small item for Tesla relative to other automakers, because Tesla always focused on outright sales or financing sales. And if there was leasing, it was really not through Tesla. It was always through banking partners, so off the balance sheet of Tesla. Why Tesla did this? There are two main reasons. Number one, a leasing sale makes your financials look worse from an accounting perspective, even if everything goes right later with leasing. Initially, it makes it look worse. So Tesla always was focused on, of course, they make smart financial decisions, so they de-emphasize this. Plus, there was the other element that when you have like periods of price spikes, like the one we saw during COVID, vehicle prices increased a lot. It's very hard to get the resale value assumption right for the leased vehicle, which the automaker has to make. This exposes the automaker to resale value risk. For example, if you were too optimistic about the resale value, but you get the leasing vehicle back after, let's say, 3 years, and the value is now much lower, you have to recognize that lower resale value. So you have a hit to your P&L. And by not emphasizing leasing sales, you can avoid all this balance sheet risk, etc., and making your numbers worse. And this is what Tesla did, and was the perfect strategy. People who didn't do it, perfect example is BMW, who took a huge hit because of too many leasing sales, and the resale value assumption was wrong. And the reason why the resale value assumption is often wrong is because automakers want to use the highest possible one, so they can offer the most attractive leasing deal. Because if you assume in your financial modeling as the automaker very low resale assumption, the leasing rate will be very high that the model spits out. So you're like in a conundrum here. But anyways, so it's just this item. I don't expect very much from its line item in Tesla, but you see it's going to grow later. And this is just a function of the overall growth of the business as Tesla expands the automotive business. So with that, I move on out of automotive, and now we basically move into the second big leg of sort of the Tesla story. And this is energy generation and storage. But this should really be energy storage at this point. There's very little energy generation.
Right.
It's really basically energy storage is of course Tesla's large commercial mega batteries that look like shipping containers, and then you have the small home batteries that consumers can buy. But it's really about the megapacks, and Tesla sells a fantastic amount of them, and they're growing like weeds. And this was also the primary reason why 2Q, when Tesla announced deliveries and deployments, the stock temporarily moved up massively, because Tesla, I think, more than doubled quarter to quarter deployments, and that had a significant financial effect. And Tesla also, when you go back to the transcripts of the earnings calls, Tesla has been very, very bullish on this item, and they're basically saying, I think, quote, they say demand is like wildfire or something. Anyways, they're extremely bullish, and the CFO said from 2Q, I think, that sales this year deployments will more than double.
Yeah.
And they're very bullish for next year. And next year they have a lot more capacity. And also importantly, the capacity will be spread across 2 continents. So there is, of course, the California Lathrop factory, and then there will be from Q1, which is just a few months away, the second factory, the first purpose-built factory in Shanghai, which then can serve basically the large Asian market. So that will be a game changer. And of course, that factory then has full access to the lower cost Chinese supply chain, which is also a huge competitive advantage. So I'm extremely bullish about this piece. This is basically, in my mind, this is the 2025 story. We don't need massive improvement in FSD for a good 2025 year. Of course, that would supercharge the stock. But even if FSD keeps being like a slow grind, it gets better, yada yada yada. We don't need like a massive breakthrough, because I think energy and storage has massive potential. You see how 2023 revenue was 6 billion in the business, then 10 billion. So like a 70% increase. And this, again, is based on management guidance for this year. This is a high certainty forecast. And then with the Shanghai factory coming online, etc., and Tesla guidance, plus the fact that if you want to order a megapack right now, you can get one the earliest in 3Q 2025. And by the time we reach 3Q 2025, Tesla will have received a lot more orders, because it's just no-brainer in many jurisdictions. So I expect significant growth. So we go from 10 billion to 18 billion. So this is a significant needle mover, of course. And so 70% increase, and then it keeps growing from there as the Shanghai factory ramps. An important note, the Shanghai factory is significantly larger than the Lathrop factory. Yeah. And if we learned one thing from Tesla's factories, they simply get better with each iteration. So an equal-sized factory will have more output. And the new one is even 3 times bigger. So arguably, that thing, when fully ramped, can maybe output even more than 3 times what Lathrop can do. And Elon said on the last call that Lathrop is even running on a 40 gigawatt run rate right now. So Tesla appears to have like massive supply pretty soon. And this will make a big financial impact, because this is also a product that is very high margin. Mm-hmm. Plus, there is an ongoing maintenance charge of about 3%. So there's an ongoing component to this. Of course, it's not going to hit now, but over time, this also adds to the overall story. But this is very, very interesting. So then here in the income statement, I show this as a separate line item, of course, as it should be, and as it is shown right now. Then we go to robotics. So robotics is said in part 1. This is basically Optimus program, and you can see there's in my forecast literally nothing. I basically expect 2025 will be more meaningful internal deployments, but also on a still small scale. And I expect Tesla maybe in 2026 to start doing like selected customer trial programs, just as they did with the semi program, in a small scale, like 300 million in revenue, and then 1 billion, and goes up from there. Because the thing about Optimus that is so crazy, it's you have to keep in mind this is a product that weighs about 5% of a Model Y,
Right.
and so the and there's like when you look at manufacturing, there is a very strong correlation between the weight of a product and how quickly you can scale it, as long as volumetrically they are in the same sort of ratio to the weight mass. So Optimus is just much smaller product, and so the scaling of the production should be much faster. So this could, yeah, and that's why I wrote in the headline, it's an incalculable long-term opportunity, because this can, as soon as the Optimus brain works to be useful, this can go through the roof. But this is a quite wild product, and I think this is also why one of the smartest people on the planet, Elon, is so bullish about this.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, but again, you can see my forecast. I try to be here on purpose, like conservative, because it's very easy to show you, I don't know, 20 billion in revenue. Because again, this product has the potential to be scaled very quickly, as long as you can get the components. And I think Elon kind of gave us a little hint in the last earnings call, or maybe it was on Twitter, I don't remember, but he was talking about it, and he was interestingly saying that the main focus area right now in the Optimus problem is actually making it simpler so they can make more of them.
Right.
I would have expected, I don't know, to increase skills and training, blah, 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 something neural net related, but not something as mundane as figuring out manufacturing. But anyways, so that is very interesting. But you see, my forecast is not crazy on that point, so not inflated by anything crazy in this product line, but something to keep in mind. Anyways, and then if we move on, so as I said earlier, FSD subscriptions, I model separate, because to me this is like, again, this is most likely how Tesla will account for this in the future. Purchases will be in the auto revenue line, and subscriptions will be broken out separately once it gets big enough. And so basically, these historic numbers, Tesla doesn't give us exactly how much they make on subscriptions. However, on Twitter, once in a while, they drop certain hints, and the CFO drops a couple of comments where you can back out certain numbers. For example, that there was on the 1Q call, he said, oh, excluding the feature release, the gross profit margin would have been this and that. And then actually, when you do the numbers, which I did, then you can back out how much must have been that type of revenue. So anyways, this is very nitty-gritty stuff. I won't go into the detail because it would just take too long. But this is basically what I backed out. And then also interestingly, Elon said on the 3Q call, end of October, that after the 1010 Cybercab event, they saw a substantial increase in take rate.
Right.
So yeah, so that was very interesting, and I also tried to account for that in my forecast without going too crazy on the assumptions. And then you see how it ramps up. Yeah, you might say, oh, doesn't make much of a difference. 2025, 1 billion, and then 5 billion. But again, this is a software product. This is a software margin. This is it's not like credit sales, which drops to the bottom line. There's a little bit of cost against it, but it's basically probably a 90% gross margin product line. And the reason why it's not 100% revenue, or almost 100%, is Tesla does R&D capitalization, which is very common under IFRS, a little less common under US GAAP. And what it means basically is Tesla spent some money developing this stuff. And they told us in the SEC filings that once they start launching this product or rolling it out wider to the consumer, they will start amortizing that expense, which means once they create the revenue, they will also have some expense against it, and that is money they spent many quarters or some maybe years ago.
Right.
So this is nothing weird. This is complete standard accounting for this type of stuff. Extremely widely used under IFRS, and under US GAAP not so much. I just want to point this out because I also saw on X some people with some accounting knowledge. They think this is like some accounting fudgery or whatever. It's just
Normal.
It looks a little odd because they probably have a limited accounting background.
Yeah.
And maybe too focused on US GAAP. And because, anyways, so there's nothing wrong with this accounting. This is completely normal. And there's also one very good reason why the accounting authorities allow companies to do that. And the reason is, if you do very long-term, very expensive products, you need to capitalize these costs. Otherwise, no company would do them because they would just destroy your P&L in the first few years, while it creates too much of a drag.
Yes.
And this helps you to push it into the future, and this encourages companies to make big bets, and that's why Tesla is using those accounting provisions. Okay, so anyway, so again, this is very interesting revenue line because it's a very, very high software margin type revenue. It is very interesting. Then we move on to the ride-hailing network that is fed by vehicles owned by Tesla customers. So this does not include what you see right now on the screen, does not include any Cybercab. So this is purely based on okay, Tesla is expanding the app, and we have seen pictures of that Tesla app. So this is not a pipe dream. The app exists, and we have learned on the earnings call, Tesla has been building all the modules needed for a Uber-esque experience on the phone for many years. And Tesla has, as I understood it, completed all these building blocks. And actually people in the Bay Area, so Tesla employees in the Bay Area, they right now, as we talk, they use that system. So they have their own little internal Tesla Uber, and people use it to try it out. And Tesla told us they expect to launch this ride-hailing network in a limited fashion in California and Texas. I understood like in early 2025 sometime. Right. It's also far away. So I gave, I mean, management typically knows best, so I gave that credit, and then I thought about how this would most likely turn out. So what I thought about is, okay, first of all, what's the fleet size in California, Texas, and also the wider US? And then I thought about what percent of the US fleet and California fleet can actually run the latest FSD, which is basically you need hardware 3 or 4, and most likely initially, as Tesla started doing, is they do the latest version on the latest hardware, and then later they roll it out to the hardware 3. Plus, of course, not every customer will jump to that. For example, I don't need my Model Y to make money for me, so I will not contribute probably my car because I don't want to find vomit in my car at some point. Even if I made $500 in the last 2 weeks, it's not my thing. Yes. And I talked to a bunch of people, and a bunch of people won't contribute their Tesla.
Sure.
Simply not. But I also know a lot of bean counters. Sorry, I don't want to be disparaging, but there will be some economical people think about this more rational than I do, and they will say, "Oh, I'm happy to clean out a little bit of vomit every 2-3 weeks if I can get $500 because that's the rational thing to do." Okay, so there will be some people. So I expect, and I left some notes on this slide. I expect some initial low participation rate, and then as word of mouth spreads, people will start participating more. That would be my base case.
Okay,
and then it rolls out outside of California and Texas. So this is what you see, and that's why you have like this what basically looks like an exponential increase. as it basically emanates out from California, Texas, and the customer participation rate increases. So this one is a very interesting revenue line because this is again software revenue,
Right.
Because Tesla basically built everything, spent everything. They told us it works, so it's literally just enabling it for non-employees, and so there's very little cost to this. And Tesla, in my assumptions, I model Tesla takes an Apple tax, 30% of revenue.
Okay.
And so this is very interesting. This is very low numbers, but this is basically almost pure profit. So again, here's something wrong. I just see. So this number is wrong. I need to fix that. So again, big picture is there will be a modest effect in 2025 in my forecast, but not a massive one. So again, this forecast doesn't rely on massive ride-hailing or FSD revenue.
Right.
And then if we move on, now we get to the Cybercab. Here, 2025, I expect absolutely no revenue from Cybercab because Tesla told us they expect production to launch next year. So I expect Tesla not having any Tesla Robotaxi network revenue until 2Q. It starts at a very low base and then it grows. You might look, oh, this looks too low. But you have to keep in mind when Tesla starts producing the Cybercab, they start from fleet size 0. And even if you assume a very fast ramp, it just takes a while to build up a sufficient number of vehicles. And then, of course, in a quarter, the average vehicle size matters for calculating what could be the implied revenue, and not like the total number that you see at the end of the month. You might think, oh, this is like a very nitty-gritty point, but when you have like an exponential growth, that consideration makes meaningful difference.
Sure.
Okay, yeah. So again, you see, my forecast doesn't rely on, spectacular robotaxi revenue at all, and it's an important point because if I just really jump back to the total revenue projection, you see basically all this massive revenue growth. There's very little AI related here.
Yeah.
It's really powered by energy, some expansion of auto because the product portfolio is expanding, and then a bunch of little stuff. And when you add everything together, you end up in this curve. And if I now jump to the last item, which is, I think, perhaps the most underappreciated item in Tesla, it's the service and other. So this is really interesting because, first of all, this segment has never seen a sequential decrease. It has always grown.
Right.
Because it's not affected by discounts, selling prices, yada, yada, yada. It's powered by the constantly growing fleet. People just at some point need to bring the car to the dealership. For example, my Tesla's never had any problem, but I had rock hits, and I had to replace my windshield once, and I got once extremely unluckily, and I got like a rock chip on the edge of the glass roof. And that create as anyways but nothing wrong with the Tesla, everything worked perfectly, but I had to basically twice get these glass pieces replaced. Insurance paid for it, no problem, and Tesla made some good money off that. But here's the interesting thing. There are two things. Tesla has grown so quickly, therefore most of the fleet is still under warranty, but we are getting to a point where a lot of the large volume selling quarters start to drop out of the warranty, and Tesla's out of warranty fleet is growing very, very quickly soon, and therefore the revenue that out of warranty fleet will generate will go up, because then people need to pay for these repairs, and this is a very lucrative business. I mean, we know this from other automakers, but there's a big difference. So automakers typically, when there's something wrong with their cars after they age, they make a lot of money on the part sales.
Right.
But the dealerships takes all the other stuff, basically the margin on the labor, and basically the margin they need to make to survive. But Tesla captures all of that revenue because all the dealerships are owned by Tesla.
Sure.
So that margin stays with Tesla. So the out of warranty fleet is more valuable compared to other automakers, and this starts to also make a meaningful impact. And it's not a high margin business because Tesla's strategy is that they don't want to sort of exploit the customer and squeeze them when they come to service. No, this is not their strategy, but they're making a bit of money, but this is really more a top line revenue story. It's not so relevant for the earnings, but it kind of helps the top line, and you can see like in last year 8 billion. And even though overall car sales were basically flat, that line grew by almost 27%.
Yeah.
And then next year I expect 22% growth, and then even it accelerates because again this is modeled on volume, on quarterly volumes, and an average how much person drives on average based on public data, and I basically calculated at what point in time what percent of the fleet is out of warranty. So anyway, I can't output everything, it would be too much. My model, I think, is over 1,000 lines by now. But anyway, so this is kind of the background to this, how this comes together is not pulled out of thin air. I don't really use margins or anything. Margins are all outputs in my models.
Okay.
So anyway, so this is an interesting business line because also large business, and this all adds together. And then if we jump back to this picture, we now talked about the auto piece, the energy piece, and the AI opportunity. And as we now sort of laid out, there's very little AI in here because it's just a more 27 story. This is all energy and auto. So, and then when we sort of put this all together, what's sort of the outcome? I'm now so I don't have the slide here right now. So now actually, Larry, sorry, Randy, will you mind pausing 1 second?
Sure.
This ultimately. Okay. So we're back, and so I just had to find this slide. That's why we do stop. So this is basically, if we now fast forward to basically the bottom line. So what does all this revenue talk mean? I skipped now a bunch of components. Basically, I skipped my research and development assumption, my SG&A assumption for Tesla, my other operating income assumption for Tesla. We didn't talk about my tax assumption, and also we didn't talk about the share count assumption. There's a lot of other stuff which we now skip we jump directly to bottom line. So when you take all my revenue and all this other stuff I just mentioned, and you think about, okay, what is the EPS that Tesla will generate, then, and what does this mean for the share price? I'm not showing the EPS here, but it's easy to calculate. So this chart, so the red line shows you the true PE. So what is the true PE? The true PE is when you take at a given point in time, let's say this point in time, what were the actually reported EPS of Tesla in the next 4 unreported quarters from that point in time?
I see.
It's like as if I had known with 100% accuracy the next 4 unreported quarters, okay, what would be the implied PE? Why I call it the true PE. So it has nothing to do with the last 12 months PE. It's backward looking. It has nothing to do with the consensus. It's basically what actually happened. So you can only do it after the fact, looking back. You can't do it forward-looking, unfortunately. And you can also say that the true PE is the PE based on consensus if the consensus is 100% accurate.
Got it.
So this I run this and I run this analysis to get a sense of where the stock usually trades. And I do this for all the stocks I'm interested in, and because it gives you kind of a range. And you can see Tesla here was sort of the EV bubble period where everybody went crazy, and Tesla traded briefly at 175 times. This was in the first quarter of 2021. We all know what happened later, and then here is kind of the trough. This was like Tesla hitting almost 100 per share. So it was first quarter 2023. So two bruising years between these 2 points, and is reflected in earnings. So here, Tesla stock got way ahead of itself. Around here, I think Elon warned that the stock might deflate like a souffle if something happens. But people didn't really want to pay attention. And anyway, and then Elon sold here. We all know what happened, and then inflation hit, etc., etc. Investors will all know stuff. But then, if you say, okay, if you take the last 12 months, and okay, what was the average?
Okay.
So the number is 69. So over the last 12 months,
that's a good number.
Yeah, it's a good number, because if we just recap what happened, there were the first quarter, all the issues with global logistics, Red Sea, we talked in part one about that. Then there was this interesting judge who took Elon's comp package away, and for the first time, even Uber bulls kind of started to think about selling stock because they feared that basically the worst would happen. Elon would leave Tesla.
Yeah,
there was a lot of this stock, there was a lot of this type going on, and this created like this year's low. And then, of course, we know what happened. Elon won resounding kind of victory, got the comp package, stock traded up a lot. And then 2Q came around. Tesla printed amazing energy storage numbers, more than double. Nobody had this on the radar. Stock traded up a lot more. Then stock over the summer trade down, is usually the case in the summer months. And then on the 5th of August, we had this little market crash where the Japanese yen, the carry trade, unwound partially. We're like people running around like wild chickens. I told everyone it's fine. It's not a big deal. I've seen this movie before. I've been long times in market, and exactly what happened. Stock quickly rebound after that, and then of course 3Q came around, very strong numbers. I mean, stock I think traded 212, jumped very quickly to 240s in after hours, and the next day or next couple of days to 270, then pulled back quite a bit as the Trump win appeared less likely. Because the polls were wrong. And then, of course, everybody knows from around, I think, a 230 level of 240, I might be slightly off here. Then the stock went through the absolute roof after POTUS being Trump. And now Tesla, for the first time, having friendly POTUS. It's like complete danger. So this is just a recap of the main events, the way I see it in 2023, 2024. I'm sure I forgot something, but over the last 12 months, the implied multiple was 69. Of course, I can only do the multiple till early January because I need 4 unreported Tesla quarters.
Right.
So that's every time I lose a quarter going forward to the present, I fill the gap with my forecast.
Right.
So just keep this in mind. So over time, the true PE merges to a hybrid of true and my forecast, and then later gets to entirely my forecast.
Okay.
That is how all this stuff works. And then when you keep the 69 PE multiple just constant, and that's why you have this flat line here, and you apply that PE to the earnings the way I forecast them, based on the revenues that we have now discussed for probably 2 hours, you get to these share prices.
Okay.
So, so basically what this means is, with the 1Q, with the 1Q, we should see a 320, because, with the announcement of the 4Q, this is end of January.
Right.
The PE multiple is not based on the 2024 numbers anymore. It moves entirely into 2025.
Right.
It's just basic valuation, because the multiple is always forward looking. So in January, on the trading day after the numbers were announced for 4Q, the PE is fully based on 1Q 2025, 2Q, 3Q, 4Q. And then the day after 1Q 2025 is announced, the PE multiple moves to 2Q, 3Q, 4Q, and first Q 2026. And it goes on like this. There's something to keep in mind. So basically, by the end of December, so basically by December of 2025, the earnings number that you see that is behind this what looks crazy $656 is actually the unreported 4Q of 2025, because the 4Q is reported end of January in 2026.
Right.
So here, this is still 4Q 2025 plus 1Q 2026, 2Q, 3Q. So this is of course, on a rolling basis, as professional investors would do it. And it is basically then the number that falls out. And if we now go back to the very beginning, oh my God, I do too many slides. So this is basically driving everything, and now I just need to do this so everything shows up. So it's just this revenue growth driving everything, and once I'm ready to basically publish everything, you will see there is not like crazy gross margin improvements behind this. This is largely a roll forward of cost, etc., and simply the effects of Tesla scaling. Because what for example was one of the reasons why my 3Q missed so much, I thought Tesla's R&D expenses would go up, but they went down further. So this is incredible to me, because Tesla is developing so many products,
Right.
And perhaps it has to do with the R&D capitalization that I mentioned earlier, but not a big deal. But bottom line is, Tesla is a really lean machine, and the large headcount reductions in 2Q 2024 really helped to reestablish that lean nature of Tesla, because Tesla got a tiny little job before, but Elon clearly cleaned up, and the CFO said the cost cutting in 2Q drives over $1 billion of run rate annual cost saving. But it's also something to keep in mind. So anyway, so overall, basically having done all this analysis, I'm very bullish for 2025. Very bullish, more bullish than I've been in a very long time.
And AJ, just for fun, the other thing, you've got your 600 for the end of 2025, and that's, I'm only a little higher than you. I mean, sure, it's really a big number when you think of in terms of the market.
Yes.
I'm sitting at 700 as my expectation, and I come at it in a similar way than you do, but not as clever. I really like the way that you've done this. But where the other thing everybody is always interested in, where do you see the end of January after the earnings report in January 2025?
So after the earnings report, this is a tricky moment, because 4Q is not like the other quarters, because 4Q is the expectation. The expectation of the market is always to receive the full year guidance.
Right.
This makes it special. And in this year, when Q4 was announced in January this year, stock traded down massively.
Right,
Why?
right.
Because Tesla did not provide guidance. That was the reason, period.
Sure.
And but the fact that Elon already gave us a little bit of 2025 guidance
Uh-huh.
basically tells me he's not going to do it this time. He will give us some guidance.
Right,
Because on the 3Q, Tesla said, not Tesla, Elon said that he expects 20 to 30% volume growth,
right,
and this would be like wild, and and the fact that the tax credit goes away is not going to change this massively. By my estimate, there might be on total sales maybe a 5% volume impact, but as we said earlier in this conversation, there are good reasons that this might be a long times away, and for that reason, the impact on an annual basis 2025 might be 2%. So
right,
it's like a fart in the wind basically,
right.
and Tesla standards. And so long story short, there I don't expect that bad 4Q experience to repeat
Right.
next quarter. This should set a bullish undertone for the year. I expect Elon to not massively change his mind in basically the course of just 3 months. When he said in October 20 to 30%, I see a high likelihood he will repeat the same thing, because what should change fundamentally in 3 months?
Right.
Um, this is where I come from. It's not going to be 50% all of a sudden, and I don't see he would dial it back down to 10%. So I basically, my base case is right now he just repeats what he already said. Um, um, then I expect record quarter, record volume in auto sales, possibly even deployments, and it might be a bit lower than 2Q, because that's all we need to meet the CFO's guidance, but
Mhm.
it could be also meaningfully higher, because the CFO um, said even from 2Q that they will be selling more than double
Right,
this
right,
year energy storage. And for a CFO, and the current Tesla CFO is not known to be like uber bullish,
right,
I would
right.
say, probably a fair assessment. And so if that guy so early in the year says like, oh, we more than double the sales this year, then he has really clear visibility.
Right.
And he repeated the same thing in the 3Q. So and let's keep in mind the 3Q is end of October, so there's only, what is it, 9 weeks left in the year.
Hmm.
And if he repeats that guidance at that point, he basically has it in the bag. So that's why energy is like high, very high certainty forecast for me for Q. So near or above all-time highs. So energy will be awesome. We can expect high margins. Whether they will be at the crazy 30.5 we had in three, I don't know. But it's possible, because even the consumer product, the Powerwall, appears to be doing quite well. Of
Yes.
course,
Yes.
smaller driver, but we just heard, I think 2 days ago, that Tesla hit the daily 1,000
Right.
Powerwall production rate, which is like also kind of insane. And so anyways, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. So energy will be awesome for 4Q. Definitely, yeah, great. Volumes will be great, because Elon also guided for full year volume slightly exceeding 2023, and we all can easily calculate what that means. That means like 515,000 vehicles, which would be a significant all-time. Sorry, so it would be a significant increase and a significantly higher all-time high
Right.
for quarter. So that would be extremely positive. Um, uh, and even if the number is 495,000, which would
Yeah.
also be all-time high, I think, because I think like a lot of investors, they are kind of negative, and they're always, okay, if Elon says X, I apply zero point 0.8 to that forecast. So I think the market is probably not at 515, so even 495 will be very positive, I think. So, and this appears highly likely. And you know that the Trump tax credit removal makes that 495 even more likely because of the demand pull forward
Of
effect.
course.
And so all in all, I'm very bullish for 4Q. And then there's always, look, the other stuff like FSD, I think there's very little downside.
Right.
Yes, of course, there could be a bad accident, but FSD has been so long in trial, in beta, then supervised, blah blah blah, and we have not had serious accidents for a long time. And if there was an accident, it always turned out later that the driver did something
Right.
stupid.
Right.
So Tesla has always obviously placed safety first, and so I don't expect like a black swan event in that part of the business. I only expect like improvements because I always point this out on X. I mean, Tesla has dramatically improved compute, and this opens up new ways how they can accelerate the training of FSD. There's all kinds.
So I'm just so that I understand your chart. What would the chart imply, assuming a normal, environment? So not so much, taking into consideration macro or, special black swan events or whatever else. What does the
Yeah.
chart imply
Yeah,
for?
basically, so yeah. I'm rambling a bit much. So
That's
here, so
okay.
the chart
Oh,
basically,
that's important.
no, basically the chart implies that we should be around the 322 mark, with the announcement of the results,
Okay.
and then we will go
Up.
higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And yeah, and then yeah. So the question is really how much of this has been priced in. Given the recent price dynamics, I think there is a lot can happen. I think a lot of investors are kind of on edge right now because they don't know what the Trump
Sure.
administration really means, and they're people very bullish on the one side, but other people very bearish, and then you have people. Some view Trump is highly negative for the economy and could put us into recession. The others say, oh, it's going to be the next golden age. I think the reality will probably be somewhere in the middle. And
Yes.
overall, I'm positive because, everybody knows the red tape just was too much, and this stifles economic activity. And I have maybe even a better view on this than maybe people in the US because I sit in Europe most of the time, and like the bureaucracy has been, I think, more prevalent for longer
Oh, yeah.
in Europe than it was in US. In the US, it's maybe perhaps a more recent thing over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, where it became like really burdensome. But Europe has been sandbagged with that for a long time, and the way this sort of unraveled was that when there was like a recession or some type of economic downturn, the US went quicker in that recession, but also much more quickly recovered, got
Right.
out of it. Because just the dynamics in US, for example, in Europe, the labor laws are very strict. It's almost impossible to fire anyone, and if you
Right.
do, it's very, very costly. And so people are companies are very hesitant to hire people, and then also they wait too long to hire people, and then they're forced to keep them longer than is good really for everyone. This is different in the US, and that's why I think there's a big drive where the economy is much more dynamic. And if we can sort of bring the US even more back to the state of more dynamics, it's better for everyone. And also, my hope is that Europe will, as they have often done before, take sort of the momentum that's going on in the US and sort of copy the ideas.
Maybe, huh? That would
Uh,
be, wouldn't that be
yeah,
great?
yeah. I've already seen politicians on like on the European level talk about make Europe great again.
Yeah,
And
okay.
you tell me where they got the phrase from.
I don't
And
know.
yes, so this could be like a global movement because I think
Yes, yes.
um, the
AJ, this has been great. I've loved every minute of it. I hope that the audience has enjoyed this too, to get into this the nitty-gritty without getting too crazy, but really taking it apart piece by piece. So you're roughly at the number that we are right now, 320, 325 by the end of January. Of course, everybody knows that this is an estimate and it'll fluctuate, maybe
yeah,
even 50, 60, 70 points higher or lower, um,
yeah,
uh, based on macro, based on
yeah,
sentiment, based on
yeah,
all kinds of things. Um,
politics, name
and
it,
then
yeah,
in politics, and then you've got a 600 by the end of the year, which is close
yeah.
to my 700. So this has been fantastic. I know, I'll be looking forward to reading the comments and seeing what people thought about all of this. AJ, I think you've got to get back to work.
Mm,
I've got to produce my Friday morning show. So,
yeah,
so I want this will be on Saturday morning. I'll be everybody watching now Saturday morning. So I look forward, and I'll put that card up for part one right here of the AJ analysis. If you haven't looked at part one, I highly recommend you go back and check that out as well. AJ, thank you
right.
so much for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, everyone.
All
Bye.
right. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.